Kind of a quick update here on some things we're watching as this whole ordeal that has happened in Syria, the U.S., UK, and France attacking Syria for what they believe, what they claim, I should say, is pretty much their proof that they have the evidence that there was indeed a chemical weapons attacks carried out by the Assad regime. But more and more, their whole story is falling apart. And not so much because of Russia, but people in their own government, such as Chris Williamson here, a member of Parliament, of the British Parliament here. He was on an interview here, Channel 4, and he said this here in the interview. Listen to what he has to say.
Well, I'm joined now from Westminster by the Labour MP, Chris Williamson. Mr. Williamson, if you had had the chance to have this debate before the military action in Syria, would Jeremy Corbyn have voted for military action? Would you?
Well, I wouldn't have voted for military action. I don't think it was a sensible thing to do. It certainly wasn't in the national interest, contrary to what the Prime Minister and many Tory MPs are claiming.
But well, you know, so if not now, when children are being gassed, then when?
Well, that's a debatable point as well, isn't it? And we've heard the former First Sea Lord, Lord West, questioning the validity of the assertions. The former commander of British Armed Forces in Iraq, similarly. So there are very eminent military experts who are questioning the motive and indeed the evidence. And I think before we commit troops, or indeed before we agree to airstrikes, the very minimum I think we should have is irrefutable evidence, and I don't think we've got that. I think what
well,
we
how
heard,
debatable is debatable? I mean, was the Duma attack, might it have been faked?
Well, what we've heard from the Prime Minister is the suggestion that they'd seen social media posts and hearsay. Now, clearly, if we're going to commit our forces, we should have better intelligence than that, it seems to me. We've been through the dodgy dossier which led to the disastrous war in Iraq, and we shouldn't be going around that route again, it seems to me.
Well, I'll come back to your hearsay point in a minute, but I just ask you again, could the Duma attack have been faked, in your view?
Well, listen, I'm not an expert, am I? It's all speculation. It's all speculation. All these parliamentarians are simply speculating. That's why we need irrefutable evidence. We know from Robert Fisk, a investigative journalist who's on the ground in Duma. He's spoken to doctors, he's spoken to people actually living there, and they're actually questioning whether indeed a gas attack took place. Clearly, look, the use of chemical weapons are absolutely appalling. And the whole war situation in Syria.
I mean, this interview here is just incredible. You might want to take your time and go back and listen to the entire thing. We played 2 minutes and 8 seconds of this video, of this interview, which is a 6.11-minute video. Chris Williamson, British Parliament with the Labour Party, also Jeremy Corbyn has been very much a very vocal opponent to the British government's involvement with the U.S. in launching the airstrikes and cruise missiles against the Syrian government for the alleged chemical weapons attack. That even as Mr. Williamson is bringing out here, one of their own journalists on the ground interviewing doctors and witnesses on the ground and can't seem to find a shred of evidence that backs up all this hearsay that caused the United States to launch such a massive strike against the Syrian government and against the Syrian people, who definitely are the ones that have paid the price there. Kind of turning this as well, Murad Gazdiev, who we keep in contact with from time to time, an RT reporter, journalist. He's also in studio as well as in the field quite often. He said an 11-year-old victim of Syrian chemical attack and his family say they were asked to play along in White Helmet's video. Say they did it for food. Well, we already know, we've already heard all kinds of stories about how these people have suffered so dramatically as a result of that, of the food being hoarded by the jihadists that were operating in those areas. That's including the white helmets. Now you can notice here, I'll bring the mouse here. Here's his 11-year-old son right here. And of course, here is that 11-year-old boy right here in the hospital. Those famous video clips that we were seeing coming out of Syria that was perpetrated by the white helmets at the hospital scene where they're washing everybody off. And his father and son say that they were asked by the white helmets to participate in this video. Very damning evidence, you might say, just without a doubt there. We're going to be going deeper into those different politicians and experts. We were just watching the other day when this attack first happened, the former British military advisor who was shut down by the very broadcasting station in Britain when he challenged the narrative of Theresa May. Very troubling indeed, if you ask me. Also, we have here the Skripal case there. Now evidence coming out. Britain admits OPCW did not confirm essential evidence on our origin of the Skripal poisoning. Of course, this is the daughter and her father that were actually poisoned in a nerve gas attack. The Skripal family there inside of Britain. It has been blamed on Russia very quickly and very firmly by Theresa May of the British government. But the laboratory just cannot identify neither the laboratory this nerve agent was made at nor its origin completely. In fact, if you remember yesterday, we were sharing with you some clips there of Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, on BBC's Hard Talk with Stephen there. He was really, he brought out one of the most damning pieces of evidence on the Skripal case that really debunked the entire thing, when they were claiming, the British government was claiming that they had high concentrated pure form of the nerve agent that had been gathered as evidence at the crime scene. And of course, the foreign minister comes out and says, we know that that had to be a lie because we know because of course the Soviet Union did develop the nerve agent. It has a very rapid evaporation rate. And he said, you check the scene 2 weeks afterwards, you gather your evidence 2 weeks after this alleged chemical attack, which we know the chemical attack did happen, not so much that that was alleged there. There's not, even Russia does not argue that. But the question is, in this case here, is who carried it out? And of course, Theresa May, again, and the British government immediately pointing the finger to Russia, saying you were the only one, either Putin ordered it or you let it get out of control. And, of course, Sergei Lavrov pointed out that the United States, not only did the scientists that developed it from the former Soviet Union go to the United States, but the United States also patented this very Novichok nerve agent. And, of course, the U.S. had control of it since 1999. The CIA did. So the question remains, is the pure form that Sergei Lavrov discusses there, it couldn't have been pure if it has a fast evaporation rate. And of course, 2 weeks later, you definitely are not going to have any kind of pure form whatsoever. As he said, this made it very suspect. And of course, as Foreign Minister of Russia pointed out, he said, you know, the motive is where the issue is. He says, and Britain has every bit of motive to gain from accusing Russia of these crimes there. I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live. Just a quick take this evening, friends, the screen capture there. We'll be live tomorrow It'll probably be right closer to about 11 a.m. Eastern time there, 5 p.m. Prague time. So be watching for our live broadcast there. It'll be running about a half hour or so. Again, we'll be bringing out some of these experts, the growing number that are turning against the attack that was conducted in Syria. And of course, at the same time, they are fighting. They're fighting on the opposite side there, the U.S., President Trump, Theresa May, and Macron, to justify their attacks on the Syrian government. And of course, Israel, with its push to try to capitalize on this Syrian strike to drag Iran into the conflict, I do believe is part of a regional move. It is something that the U.S., the U.K., France are no doubt fully aware of. The Saudis are fully aware of it, and I believe the Turkish government is fully aware of it. That this is a regional move that will be conducted, and I'm afraid that Russia is going to find itself in the crosshairs of the Turkish government as well when this war kicks off between Iran and these NATO allies along with Israel. I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live. We'll keep you up to date tomorrow. And of course, as it gets late in the evening here, kind of have a hard time monitoring what's going on once we do fall asleep here in a little bit there. But I will be getting up very early, only after about 5 hours of sleep there, to make sure something has not already broke so we can update you at that time. Shalom and good evening.